Got any bread? The question lands like a wrench dropped on concrete. Dawn bleeds grey over a New Jersey street. The auto shop smells of burnt coffee and cold oil. A gaunt man in a frayed jacket steps in, hands empty, eyes steady. Laughter cracks from the bay. "Bread? In here?" He doesn't flinch. "I can fix a car for it." The room shifts, smirks, a scoff from the office door, a rich client watching like it's a bet. Hood pops. He listens to the engine like a priest at confession. "Not the battery, not the alternator. Your module's misprogrammed." Silence tightens. Keys turn, clean roar. The smirks vanish. The man swallows hard. "Just bread. If second chances spark like this, imagine the fire." The morning came in thin and colourless, the kind of light that makes even chrome look tired. A bus hissed at the curb and coughed itself empty. Across the street, Barker's auto blinked its neon open like a stubborn eyelid. Inside, compressors woke, sockets clinked, and someone laughed too loud at a joke that died before the punchline. He stood just outside the threshold, weighing warmth against pride. The drifter, cheeks hollow, beard pepper grey, jacket the colour of rain over asphalt, pinched his sleeves to smooth nothing. His breath fogged the glass. Robert Anders, though nobody here would know the last name yet. Once it had been hand-painted in block letters on 3 bay doors in a different town. He pressed a palm to his ribs. Hunger moved there like a slow animal. He stepped in. Oil and coffee smelled like the past, rubber and dust like the present. 4 heads tilted. A radio murmured classic rock through static. The owner, a thick man with a salesman's smile no one trusted, leaned on the counter and looked Robert up and down. "We don't do trade-ins on shoes," he said without looking away from the invoice. The laugh from the back bay was a little meaner this time. Robert swallowed. "Do you have any bread?" Silence. Then a socket dropped, metallic and bright. The kid in the beanie, Kyle, all elbows and bravado, snorted. "Bread? Man, we barely got donuts." "I can fix a car for it," Robert said. He didn't step forward or back, just stood, fully in the ask. The room moved around the sentence as if it were a jack placed under everything. From the waiting area, a woman in a tailored coat, Marion Price, looked up from her phone. Diamonds at her ears, scuffed heels like she'd actually walked more than a garage length in her life. She held herself like a verdict. "You fix cars?" Robert nodded once. The owner, Clint Barker, smiled with the edges of his mouth. "Buddy, we've got diagnostics that cost more than your—" Well, his hand sketched a circle that included all of Robert. "What would you say is wrong with Ms. Price's import?" "It's been vexing." 2 days, Marion said flatly. "And counting." Kyle wiped grease on a rag he'd eventually throw out without washing. "Go on then, preacher, prophesy." Robert looked at the car without touching it. He listened, not to an engine, silent, but to something else. The story of how tired a machine can be when people guess wrong. He placed his fingers on the hood, like checking a forehead for fever. He popped the latch, lifted it with a small grunt, and stood in the scented heat. Wires like veins, hoses like tendons, plastic covers pretending they were bones. He closed his eyes. A memory flickered. Another shop, brighter, with a banner that read, "Free Clinic Saturday, bring your noises." A boy at his elbow asking why everything clicks when it works. Not the battery, not the alternator. He could almost hear it already. Clint came closer, arms folded, cologne thick as policy. "You plan on fixing it with your mind?" Robert's voice stayed gentle. "Got a scanner?" That got another laugh, but thinner. The veteran tech, Mr. Dell, shoulders a little stooped, face made of honest lines, looked from Robert to Clint. Dell had seen the first electronic injections roll in before half these kids knew what torque was. He said nothing, but his silence tilted toward curiosity. Clint tapped the counter. "Humor him, Kyle." They brought the scanner. Robert's hands were steady in a way that has nothing to do with warmth. He plugged in like a ritual. The handheld chirped awake. He navigated the menu without blinking, like a man who once taught other men this exact sequence. Codes blinked. Data blinked. The machine told the truth in letters and numbers, but Robert had already heard it before the first beep. "Protection mode," he said softly. "Module's out of sync. It needs a full reprogram." Kyle's eyebrows crawled up his beanie. Marion leaned forward. Clint's mouth thinned. "Keys," Robert said. Clint hesitated, then gave them like a dare. Robert nodded to Dell. "Would you mind?" Respect offered, not asked. Dell slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine stumbled, caught, coughed like a smoker, then settled into a sulky idle. The scanner chimed in Robert's hand. His thumbs moved. He breathed out, slow. The bay quieted. Even the radio seemed to lower its voice. Minutes later, the idle smoothed. Robert gestured. "Once more?" Dell turned the key. The engine's note changed, clean even, a line drawn by a confident hand. The sound filled the shop like a cathedral organ, finding the right chord. Marion smiled without meaning to. Robert closed the hood gently, as if it was someone's chest. He stepped back. The hunger animal inside him lifted its head, alert to possibility. "Do you have any bread?" No one laughed. Marion was the first to move. She crossed to the doorway, heels knocking rhythm into the concrete, and said, "I'll be right back." Clint watched her go, with a color rising in his cheeks that didn't look like gratitude. Dell shut off the engine, got out, and wiped his hands slow. He looked at Robert the way you look at a man who knows how to listen, to machines, to air, to the silence people use to hide what they don't know. Kyle stared like a kid who just saw a card trick and realized it wasn't a trick at all. Clint found his voice. "Lucky pull." The tone tried to land like authority and fell like scrap. Robert tipped his head. "Luck doesn't keep engines running." Marion returned with a paper bag that breathed butter and heat. She handed it to Robert like it was something sacred. "Breakfast," she said, "and thank you." Robert sat on the edge of an unused tire, tore a piece, and let it sit on his tongue long enough to remember what kindness tastes like. Eyes watched him, the way a shop watches a new tool nobody knows how to use yet. Kyle broke first. "How'd you know? I mean, exactly that." Robert chewed, swallowed. "Engines sing," he said. "You just have to know the key." Dell smiled at that, small and private. Clint tried to gather the room with his voice. "Back to work, people. This isn't a charity." He looked at Robert. "Eat up and move along." Robert nodded. "I will." He took another bite, slower. He didn't look hurt. He didn't look proud. He looked like a man calibrating. Air, noise, faces, an old craft waking in his hands. Outside, the day finally found its color. Inside, something else clicked into place, quiet as a well-set valve. Not redemption, not yet, but the possibility of it, idling steady, ready to rev when asked. The next morning came colder, sky the color of steel. The bay doors of Barker's auto groaned open, spilling fluorescent light onto cracked pavement. Inside, the crew moved like pieces of machinery themselves. Wrenches clanking, hoses hissing, compressors hammering in the background. But beneath the noise, there was something new, a silence that followed Robert Anders wherever he sat. He had chosen the same corner as yesterday, a dented chair beside a stack of used tires. A paper bag rested on his lap, Marion's gift from the day before, half a loaf, wrapped as if she expected him to come back. He tore a piece, ate slow, and nodded politely to anyone who dared glance his way. Most didn't. Kyle, the young apprentice, hovered near the tool rack, pretending to search for sockets. He stole glances, questions stacking in his eyes. Finally, he walked over. "Yesterday," Kyle's voice cracked, then steadied. "How'd you know it was the module? We'd been tearing that car apart." Robert chewed, swallowed. His eyes softened. "Engines talk. People just don't always listen." That's not an answer," Kyle said, embarrassed by his own boldness. Robert leaned back, hands folded like a teacher waiting for the next question. When you hear a cough, do you check someone's shoes first? Kyle frowned, then grinned despite himself. Guess not. Machines are no different, Robert said. They cough, they stutter, they breathe wrong. You start where the breath is. Before Kyle could respond, Clint's voice cut across the bay. Kyle, enough chatting. Grab the torque wrench. His glare landed on Robert. And you don't start thinking you're running a class in here. The air stiffened. Robert lowered his eyes, not out of shame, but choice. He broke another piece of bread. Kyle hesitated, then obeyed. By mid-morning, a man stormed in, panic in his gait, sweat at his temples. Somebody, please. My truck's dead. Delivery due in an hour. Behind him, a flatbed idled with a pickup chained on. The crew swarmed, eager to prove themselves. Clint led, barking orders. Hoods up, scanners plugged, guesses flying, fuel pump, alternator, starter, each dismissed in minutes. The customer's pacing grew louder than the tools. From his corner, Robert watched, chewing thoughtfully. Finally he rose, brushing crumbs from his jacket. He approached with the quiet of someone stepping into a church. Sir, he said to the customer, may I try? The man nodded desperately. Clint spun around. Not this circus again. We'll handle it. But the customer shoved his keys toward Robert. If you can fix it, I don't care who you are. The shop froze. Robert bent over the engine, no scanner this time. He asked for the key turn, listened once, twice. His hand traced a hose, pinched it lightly, felt air where there should have been vacuum. It's pulling false air, he said. Vacuum hose is cracked. Swap it. The crew exchanged skeptical looks, but Kyle darted for a replacement. Minutes later, the engine roared alive. The customer's relief shook the walls. Robert stepped back, eyes calm. There you go. How much, what do I owe you? The man asked, gripping his hand. Robert shook his head. Nothing, just bread. The words fell heavy. Kyle whispered, Twice. He's done it twice. Dell, the veteran, gave the faintest nod, respect etched in his weathered face. Clint, arms folded, jaw tight, hissed, Luck. Nothing more. But the doubt in his tone was louder than any engine. Later, as lunch wrappers crinkled and the crew gathered in the break corner, whispers traveled faster than grease on coveralls. Marion returned, this time with coffee, setting one cup beside Robert without ceremony. You've unsettled them, she said quietly. Robert smiled faintly. Engines unsettled them first. I just listened. Marion studied him, eyes sharp, voice soft. You're not who you look like. Robert didn't answer. He sipped the coffee, eyes on the ground. Silence held his story tighter than words. The day closed with tension stretched thin. Clint slammed his office door muttering. Kyle scribbled notes he didn't want anyone to see. Dell lingered near Robert as if keeping guard, and Marion, heels tapping against concrete, left with one last glance that said, This isn't over. Robert sat alone again, chewing the last of the bread. Engines hummed in his ears like old friends. And somewhere beneath the hunger, something long buried began to stir. The shop felt different that morning, like the air itself was waiting. The sky hung low, bruised with clouds, and even the gulls over the highway seemed quieter. Inside Barker's auto, tools clanged with less certainty. Laughter felt forced, and every glance found its way toward the corner where Robert Anders sat, calm as ever, sipping yesterday's coffee Marion had brought him. Kyle buzzed with nervous energy, bouncing on his heels as he organized wrenches no one had asked him to. Dell, the veteran, kept wiping the same rag over already clean hands. Even Clint Barker, the boss, paced his office, blinds snapping as he checked the street. Everyone knew what was coming. The test. At 9 sharp, a tow truck rolled up with a black luxury sedan chained behind it. The engine was silent, the hood locked like a clenched jaw. The driver climbed out, exasperation etched into every line of his face. I've been to 3 dealers, 2 specialists, and an electrical shop. Nobody can fix it. If you can't, I'm scrapping it. Clint smiled, false confidence dripping from his voice. You came to the right place. Then, loud enough for the entire crew. Robert, your chance to prove you're more than stories. The air tightened. Marion, already standing near the waiting area, crossed her arms, eyes burning holes into Clint. Kyle whispered to Dell. He set him up. Robert rose slowly, brushing crumbs from his jacket. He approached the car like it was an old friend needing comfort, not repair. His palm slid over the hood, a quiet greeting. Someone give me ignition, he said. A mechanic turned the key. The engine coughed, wheezed, and nearly died. Robert tilted his head, closed his eyes, listening. The room hushed. Even the radio faded beneath the faltering rhythm of the machine. Again, Robert murmured. The engine sputtered. He crouched, hand hovering over wires, nose catching the faintest whiff of exhaust. Then he stood, eyes sharp. It's not the hardware. The software's corrupted. This model shipped with a faulty update. Needs a clean reprogram. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crew. Clint scoffed. Software, that's what you're going with. Dealers couldn't solve it, but you can. Robert met his gaze steadily. Yes. The customer nodded desperately. Do whatever you need. Clint's jaw worked, but he didn't stop him. Not yet. Robert called for the old shop laptop, dusty, keys worn, screen flickering. He connected cables, fingers moving with the memory of 1,000 similar jobs. Lines of code scrolled. The crew leaned in, whispers spreading. Kyle's mouth hung open, eyes darting between the screen and Robert's face. Minutes later, Robert leaned back. Try now. The key turned. The engine roared to life, smooth, strong, like a lion freed from a cage. The sound filled the shop, bouncing off steel and concrete, silencing every doubt. Spontaneous applause broke out. Kyle whooped. Even Dell let a small smile escape. Marion's eyes shone with vindication. But Clint burned. His authority was slipping like oil on glass. He forced a laugh, sharp as broken metal. One lucky guess doesn't make you a miracle worker. Let's see if you can keep it up. That afternoon, another car arrived. Sleek, expensive, owned by a well-known businessman in town. Clint's grin widened as he intercepted. Robert, why don't you handle this one too? Let's really test your talents. Robert nodded without suspicion. He popped the hood, studying wires and hoses with quiet precision. The businessman hovered, nerves frayed. Meanwhile, Clint leaned close to a young apprentice, barely out of high school, hands trembling around a rag. His whisper cut like a blade. Swap those ignition wires, quick! Don't let him see. The boy froze. But do it, Clint hissed. The message didn't feel like a threat. The boy obeyed. It felt like wires into wrong places. Alex just adjusted Robert his lamp to fetch a breath settling. When Robert returned and turned the calibration tools, the engine coughed violently. The magnifier, smoke spilling out. The smell of burning insulation filling the siren wailed. And the businessman shouted, "You're ruining my car!" Inside, chaos the shop held its breath. Mechanics muttered, eyes darting. Rush. Clint spread his arms wide, triumphant. Devotion took the time it needed. A fraud dressed in rags. The apprentice's face drained of color. Robert didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He leaned closer, tracing the wires, eyes narrowing. Then he looked directly at the boy. "Did you move these?" The boy's lip trembled. Silence crushed the room. Marion stepped forward, hand on his shoulder. "Tell the truth, son." Tears welled. He told me to. Mr. Barker said—" The words cracked like thunder. All eyes whipped to Clint. The businessman's rage turned sharp. "You sabotaged your own man? With my car?" Clint stammered. That's ridiculous." But the boy's sobs carried more weight than his denial. Robert straightened, calm, steady, cutting through the storm. "Give me 5 minutes." He corrected the wires, soothed the engine with deft adjustments, and when the key turned again, the motor purred clean. The businessman's fury melted into awe. "Incredible. After that mess, you still saved it." "I'd pay double, triple." Robert shook his head. "I don't want money, just bread. The words hit harder than any invoice. Clint's empire cracked. Dell stepped forward, voice strong for the first time in years. "I've worked here longer than anyone, and I'll say it plain. This man knows more than all of us combined. If he leaves, I leave too." Others murmured in agreement. Kyle shouted, "Me too!" Marion faced Clint squarely. "You tried to destroy him, and instead you destroyed yourself." Clint's face reddened, fists clenched, but the weight of the room pressed him down. Authority had shifted. Robert, still calm, raised a hand. "I'm not here to take anyone's place. I only want to teach, to fix what's broken. Engines and maybe more." His words landed like gospel. The crew looked at him with respect, some with shame, all with something they hadn't felt in years: hope. The businessman clapped Robert on the shoulder. "If you ever open your own shop, I'll be your first customer." Marion smiled faintly, whispering just loud enough for him, "You're no drifter. You're a master who forgot his name." Robert lowered his eyes, humility anchoring him, even as the room seemed ready to crown him. He whispered only to himself, "Just bread, that's all I wanted." But everyone knew it had become much more. Night pressed heavy against the garage windows, neon buzz echoing like an insect trapped in glass. After the chaos of the day, the luxury sedan resurrected, the sabotage exposed, the boss humiliated. The shop felt drained, a battlefield after smoke cleared. Tools were left unpolished, rags tossed, half-empty cups of coffee cooling on benches. Clint Barker shut himself in his office, blinds drawn. The muffled sound of drawers slamming and pacing feet bled through the thin walls. Every mechanic knew the rhythm, anger chewing on itself. None dared knock. Out in the bay, Robert Anders sat quietly on his usual chair, the dented one by the tire stack. He didn't look like a conqueror. His shoulders sagged, eyes distant, crumbs of bread on his palm. To anyone else, he seemed tired. To Kyle, the youngest of the crew, he looked like someone holding back a storm of memories. Kyle approached, awkward. "Mr. Anders, Robert, today was crazy." Robert glanced up, a small smile softening the hollows of his face. "Engines don't lie, people do. That's the difference." Kyle shuffled, lowering his voice. "Why didn't you tell everyone to fire Clint right there? You had the chance." Robert leaned forward, elbows on knees, gaze steady. "I'm not here to take crowns. I've worn one before, heavy thing, harder to remove than to carry." His eyes flicked away, back to the floor, as if the memory cut sharper than a blade. Kyle didn't understand fully, but he felt the weight. "Still," he said, "you deserve better than bread." Robert chuckled quietly. "Bread is life, kid. Don't ever mistake it for less." The next morning, tension thickened. Clint stormed out of his office, jaw set, voice booming louder than drills. "Listen up! Yesterday doesn't change a damn thing. This is my shop. You work for me, not for some drifter with bedtime stories." His finger stabbed the air in Robert's direction. The crew shifted uncomfortably. Dell, the veteran, cleared his throat. "Boss, with respect, he saved your reputation twice now. Customers are talking. They'll come back because of him, not you." A ripple of agreement traveled across the room. Clint's face darkened. "Anyone who thinks this shop belongs to him can walk." Doors wide open. For a long second, silence weighed heavy. Then Dell set down his rag, voice calm but resolute. "If Robert goes, I go." Kyle blurted, "Me too." Others nodded, murmurs swelling like an engine revving too high. Marion, who had walked in during the argument, cut through with steel in her voice. "You're blind, Barker. You're throwing away gold because your pride can't stand the shine." Clint spun toward her, red-faced. "Lady, this is my business." "No," Marion interrupted, heels clicking against the floor as she stepped closer. "It's your sinking ship, and he's the only one plugging the holes." Eyes turned to Robert, expecting him to seize the moment. Instead, he raised a hand. Stop. His voice was quiet, but it carried. The room stilled. I don't want anyone to fight for me, Robert said. I didn't come here for power or titles. I came because I was hungry. That's all. If staying here means tearing this place apart, I'll leave. The words stunned them more than any outburst could. Clint smirked, thinking victory was near, but then Dell stepped forward, face lined with years of grease and wisdom. You leave, I leave, and I bet half the men follow. Kyle echoed, more than half. The balance tilted. Clint's smirk faltered. By midday, customers trickled in, some curious, some drawn by whispers already spreading through town. The drifter mechanic who solved the impossible. Phones buzzed. Someone mentioned a post on Facebook already making rounds. Robert worked quietly, fixing small jobs, brake pads, spark plugs, nothing dramatic, but the way he moved, explaining each step to Kyle, showing Dell's apprentice how to listen for breathing through the intake, carried more power than Clint's shouting ever had. At one point, Marion returned with sandwiches and coffee for everyone. She placed Robert's bag gently on the bench. You've started something, she whispered. Robert shook his head. I only fixed what was broken. She leaned closer. Not just the cars. For a moment his eyes met hers, a flicker of something unspoken. Pain, maybe, or the fragile spark of renewal. He looked away first. That evening, long after the last customer left, Clint remained locked in his office. The crew lingered outside, reluctant to leave. Dell finally spoke. I've seen good mechanics, great ones even, but I've never seen someone teach while fixing. Kid, you've got a gift. Robert looked down, voice low. A gift can turn to curse if you forget why you carry it. Why'd you forget? Dell asked gently. Robert's jaw tightened. He almost answered, then stopped. Instead, he rose, packed his meager belongings into the same plastic bag he'd arrived with, and said, Tomorrow will be clearer. He stepped into the night, leaving the crew unsettled. Inside the office, Clint watched through blinds, rage simmering into something darker. His reflection glared back at him in the glass. He's not staying, Clint muttered. I'll make sure of it. The shop had become a battleground, humility against pride, respect against ego. And though Robert carried no crown, no title, no demand, the men felt it. Leadership had shifted. The question wasn't if Robert would stay. It was how long before the world outside learned his name again. Morning sunlight spilled across the cracked pavement, washing Barker's auto in pale gold. But the glow didn't soften the tension inside. The crew worked quieter than usual, eyes flicking between engines and the office door, where Clint sulked like a storm cloud waiting to break. Robert had arrived early, same frayed jacket, same calm steps. He didn't claim a tool or a bay. Instead, he sat with Kyle by an old Civic, guiding him through a stubborn brake job. Don't fight the rotor, Robert murmured. Feel where it wants to move. Machines resist when you force them, same as people. Kyle pressed, adjusted, then the part clicked free. His grin spread wide. That was easier than I thought. Robert smiled faintly. Because you listened. Nearby, Dell pretended to organize sockets, but his ears caught every word. A veteran doesn't often hear something new, but Robert's way of teaching struck chords deeper than torque specs. By mid-morning, two strangers walked in, neighbors of yesterday's customer. Word had spread. A drifter fixed what dealerships couldn't. Their faces carried skepticism, but also hope. Is it true? One asked. You really got that Benz running? Robert lifted his head from Kyle's project. His answer was simple. Engines are honest. If you listen, they'll tell you what they need. The men exchanged glances, then nodded. Ours has been dead for months. Think you could take a look? Clint stormed out of his office at that exact moment, voice sharp. We don't do favors here. Pay or park it somewhere else. But the customer folded his arms. We'll pay, but only if he looks at it. His finger pointed at Robert. The room froze. Clint's mouth opened, then shut. He turned purple, but couldn't argue without risking the business. Finally, he spat, "Fine. Let him embarrass himself again." Robert said nothing. He followed the men outside, crouched by their car, and began listening. Engine cold, hands steady, breath patient. The crew watched from the doorway. Within minutes, he found a cracked relay hidden beneath wiring. He explained calmly, showing Kyle and Dell the why behind the failure. When the car started, the customers erupted with gratitude. "Nobody else found it. How much do we owe?" Robert shook his head. "Nothing but bread." Their stunned laughter carried through the lot. By afternoon, more vehicles rolled in, referrals from whispers across town. A minivan with stubborn electronics, a truck coughing smoke, a hatchback that refused to idle right. Each time, Robert listened first, explained second, and only then turned a wrench. Each time the fix came not from guesswork, but from insight. And each time customers left shaking their heads in disbelief, promising to return and to tell others. The crew began gathering near him more openly now. Kyle shadowed him constantly. Even Dell leaned in, nodding slowly as Robert's words stripped problems bare. Marion returned, this time with a tray of coffees and a quiet smile. "You've turned this place into a classroom," she said. Robert shook his head. "A garage is always a classroom. People just forget to teach." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you? You forget too, once?" His eyes darkened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he handed Kyle a wrench. "Your turn." Inside his office, Clint seethed. Through the blinds, he watched customers shake Robert's hand, watched his crew lean toward the man like sunflowers chasing light. His fists slammed the desk, rattling pens. "He's stealing my shop, one job at a time." But out on the floor, the truth was simpler. Robert wasn't stealing anything. He was giving. And the more he gave, patience, knowledge, humility, the more the crew wanted to follow. That evening, after the last customer left, the crew gathered by habit around Robert's corner. Dell spoke first. "I've worked here 20 years. Thought I'd seen everything, but the way you explain, you make engines sound alive. Reminds me of when I first started, back when it was about the craft, not the paycheck." Kyle nodded eagerly. "Yeah, it's like hearing the car breathe." Robert smiled, tired but genuine. "That's because it's not just machines. It's people depending on them. When you fix a car, you fix mornings, jobs, families making it on time. You fix lives." The bay fell quiet. The words weren't grand, but they carried weight. Even the youngest mechanic felt it, the sense that their greasy hands held more than metal. Marion, who had lingered at the doorway, added softly, "And maybe, Robert, you're fixing more than cars, too." His gaze flicked to hers. For a heartbeat, pain and gratitude warred in his eyes. Then he looked down, folding the paper bag of leftover bread carefully, like something precious. Clint's shadow loomed over them all. But by now, the shop no longer pulsed to his rhythm. The beat had shifted to a quieter, steadier hum. Robert hadn't claimed leadership, but the men had already given it to him, and somewhere deep inside, Robert began to feel what he feared most, the stirrings of belonging. The week rolled on, and the name Barker's Auto began appearing in conversations across town, not because of the sign out front, but because of the man in the frayed jacket who asked for nothing more than bread. At the diner across the street, truckers whispered about the drifter who fixed a stalled semi with nothing but a screwdriver and a keen ear. On Facebook, someone posted a shaky video of Robert leaning over a car, explaining airflow to Kyle like a professor lecturing in grease-stained sleeves. The caption read, "The homeless mechanic who makes miracles." Within hours, it spread. Inside the shop, the atmosphere shifted. Customers lined up, some curious, others desperate. Old cars limped in, newer ones rolled in with baffling electronic problems. Robert treated each the same, listening first, then guiding the repair with steady hands. The crew, once skeptical, now orbited him, Kyle clung to his side, notebook smudged with grease. Dell, the veteran, watched with quiet respect, sometimes asking questions he never thought he'd ask another man. Even Marion lingered longer after dropping off her car, sipping coffee, observing Robert as if studying the man was as important as studying the work. But for Robert, the noise of admiration only deepened the silence inside him. At night, when the shop emptied and the bay smelled of metal and oil cooling, he sat alone on the dented chair. His eyes traced the shadows on the walls. He remembered another shop, his shop, 3 bays wide, his name painted bold above the doors, Anders Automotive. Apprentices laughing, engines roaring, the sound of his son's sneakers tapping concrete as the boy begged to hold a wrench, just like Dad. Then the memory shifted, cruel and sudden, screeching tires, broken glass, a hospital hallway where time moved without mercy. His wife's hands slipping from his son's laughter silenced forever. Robert gripped the chair arms until his knuckles whitened. He had walked away from everything after that. The shops, the students, the life. Bread had become enough because nothing else mattered. Until now. One evening, as the crew packed up, Dell approached quietly. "Robert," he said, voice low. "The way you carry yourself, it's not just talent, it's history. Where'd you learn all this?" Robert stared at the floor, silent. His throat tightened. Marion, who had come to pick up her car, joined them. "He's not just a mechanic, Dell. Look at him. He carries himself like someone who once had more." Robert finally spoke, each word heavy. "I had shops, apprentices, a family. I lost them, all of them." The bay fell quiet. Even Kyle, still sweeping in the corner, froze mid-motion. Dell placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Losing doesn't erase who you are. The knowledge, the gift, you still carry it." Robert's eyes glistened, but he blinked the weight back down. "Gifts can become curses when they remind you of what's gone." Marion stepped closer. "Or they can become the reason you rise again." Her words lingered in the air long after she left. The next day, reporters arrived. A local paper wanted an interview. "Homeless man revives auto shop with unheard-of skill." Robert shook his head firmly. "No interviews, no cameras. I'm just here to fix cars." But they filmed from across the street anyway. Soon, more customers arrived, chasing the story they'd heard online. The shop swelled with business, but not with harmony. Clint grew more bitter, his authority now paper-thin. He barked orders, but the crew no longer snapped to attention. Their eyes drifted toward Robert, their trust already shifted. One afternoon, Clint cornered him. "You think you're a savior, don't you? Walking in here, turning my men against me." Robert met his glare calmly. "I didn't take anything from you. They chose to listen." Clint sneered. "Then maybe I'll make sure no one listens again." His threat hung in the air, sharp as gasoline fumes. That night, Robert sat outside the shop, watching the street lamps flicker. Kyle joined him, nervously holding his notebook. "Mr. Anders," Kyle said softly, "why don't you just open your own place again? People would follow you." Robert chuckled bitterly. "Because I've already buried one dream. I'm not sure I can build another." Kyle hesitated, then held out the notebook. Pages filled with messy handwriting, sketches of engines, notes from Robert's lessons. "You already are, look." Robert flipped through, surprised. His words, phrases he barely remembered speaking, were written down like scripture. "Engines don't lie. Respect the machine, respect the person. Fixing cars is fixing lives." Kyle's voice cracked. "You're teaching me, teaching all of us. Whether you want to or not, you're building something new." For the first time in years, Robert felt the faintest flicker of warmth in his chest, a dangerous spark of hope. As the shop lights dimmed and the night closed in, Robert whispered into the silence, "Maybe bread isn't all I need anymore." The hum of distant engines on the highway answered back, as if the world itself was waiting for him to decide. The storm broke on a Thursday. By then, Barker's auto no longer felt like Barker's. Customers filled the lot before sunrise, murmuring about the drifter who healed engines with his ears. Kyle buzzed with energy. Dell moved lighter than he had in years, and even the younger apprentices carried themselves with purpose. The hum of work was steady, confident, alive. Only Clint carried the silence, pacing his office, blinds snapping open and shut like restless eyelids. He watched Robert from behind glass, watched the way men leaned toward him, how customers left with gratitude instead of suspicion. Envy gnawed his insides raw. That morning a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Mr. Harlan, a local businessman known for his temper as much as his wealth. His suit gleamed, shoes polished sharp. He stormed into the bay. "My Escalade dies every week," he barked. "3 shops failed me. I heard about your miracle worker. Let's see if he's real." All eyes swung to Robert. Clint seized the moment. He strutted forward, voice dripping control. "Of course, Mr. Harlan. I'll handle your vehicle personally. My men will assist." But Harlan shoved the keys toward Robert. "Not you, him." The crew froze. Clint's face twitched, but he forced a laugh. "As you wish. Robert, show Mr. Harlan what you can do." His eyes glinted with something darker than defeat, calculation. The SUV was rolled in. Robert leaned under the hood, eyes narrowing at faint irregularities. "Start it," he said calmly. The engine coughed, then settled into a rough, uneven growl. Robert listened, head tilted. He pressed a hand against the manifold, closed his eyes like a doctor feeling a pulse. Fuel pressure's unstable. Could be pump, but no, it's the regulator. Weak spring. The crew exchanged impressed glances. Harlan scowled. "Can you fix it or not?" Robert nodded. "Yes, 15 minutes." He asked Kyle for tools, and together they began working, methodical, careful. But as Robert reached for the new regulator, Clint's hand brushed another part of the tray, fingers curling around a small valve. He slipped it into his pocket. Minutes later, Robert reassembled the engine. Kyle turned the key. The SUV roared, smooth and strong. Relief spread across the shop like sunlight. Harlan's grin cracked his stern face. "Finally, what's the bill?" Robert shook his head. "No bill, bread's enough." The room buzzed, but before triumph could settle, Clint spoke loudly. "Funny thing," he sneered. "You fixed the wrong part." The crew turned, confused. Clint pulled the valve from his pocket, holding it up. "This here? This was installed wrong. That's the real issue. He just got lucky again." Gasps rippled through the bay. Kyle's face paled. Dell clenched his jaw. Robert wiped his hands slowly, eyes meeting Clint's. "You planted that." Clint smirked. "Approve it." The crew erupted with whispers. Kyle stammered, I saw him take something. I just didn't." "Enough!" Clint barked. "You'd trust a beggar over your boss? He doesn't belong here?" "He never did." Harlan narrowed his eyes. "If this man fixed my SUV, I don't care what you say. I'll spread the word. This shop owes him its life." Clint's composure cracked. "This shop owes me. My father built it, my sweat kept it alive, and I won't let some street rat steal it." The words rang ugly in the silence that followed. The crew stood still, but their faces told the truth. Clint had lost them. Robert exhaled, slow and steady. He turned to the men, to Marion, who had entered quietly, to Kyle, clutching his greasy notebook. His voice carried low but certain. "I never came here to steal. I never wanted power. I wanted bread, that's all. But bread led me back to engines. Engines led me back to teaching, and teaching led me back to myself." He paused, eyes dark with memory. "My name is Robert Anders. Once I ran shops across this state. Once I trained dozens of men who stand as masters today. Once I had a family. I lost it all, and I thought I was finished. But standing here, I see I'm not finished. Not yet." The shop breathed as one. Even Clint's rage faltered under the weight of confession. Robert stepped closer, voice firm now. "Clint Barker, you tried to sabotage me twice. You tried to humiliate me, Break me, bury me. But all you've buried is your own honor. Dell spoke next, gravel in his tone. He's right. You're done, Barker. One by one the men nodded. Kyle stepped forward, clutching his notebook. Robert taught me more in a week than you did in 2 years. If he leaves, I leave. Harlan folded his arms. So do I. As a customer. My friends will too. This man is the shop now. Clint's face twisted, a storm collapsing in on itself. His fists clenched, but there was no fight left to win. He turned toward his office, muttering curses, and slammed the door behind him. The shop exhaled. Marion broke the silence, her voice carrying like a bell. Robert, whether you want it or not, you've become the center here. People believe in you. Maybe it's time you believe too. Robert lowered his gaze, the weight of past and present pressing on him. But around him, Dell's respect, Kyle's hope, Marion's quiet faith, he felt something stir stronger than grief. Not a crown, not a curse, something simpler, a second chance. The morning after Clint's collapse, the shop felt lighter. For years, Barker's auto had carried a heaviness in its walls, the smell of grease mixed with bitterness, the sound of tools clanging under orders, barked rather than taught. But now the rhythm shifted. Laughter returned. The clang of wrenches carried something close to joy. Robert arrived as always, frayed jacket, quiet steps, but the reception had changed. Kyle waved him over immediately, notebook in hand, eager to show sketches he'd made from yesterday's lessons. Dell greeted him with a nod that felt less like acknowledgement and more like salute. Even the younger apprentices straightened when he passed, not out of fear, but respect. Marion arrived mid-morning with pastries and coffee for everyone. She set Robert's bag gently in his usual spot. "Don't pretend this is still just about bread," she teased, her smile warm. Robert chuckled softly. "Bread is enough, but maybe coffee helps too." Work poured in faster than ever. Cars lined the street, some from neighborhoods across town, others from miles away. Customers came not only to fix engines, but to witness the man whispered about in cafes and gas stations. Robert didn't chase the attention. He split time between bays, moving slowly, guiding hands rather than taking tools himself. He showed Kyle how to hear the hesitation in the exhaust. He taught a young apprentice to feel the tension in a belt without gauges. He explained to Dell that sometimes old habits cloud sharper senses. "Fixing a car isn't just fixing a car," Robert said often. "It's fixing mornings, jobs, lives tied to wheels and engines. Never forget that." The crew wrote his words down, repeated them, let them settle deep. The shop began to sound less like a workplace and more like a classroom, a family, a place of renewal. One afternoon, Marion lingered near the office window, watching as Robert crouched beside Kyle, both laughing quietly over a stubborn bolt. She turned to Dell. "Do you see it?" she asked. Dell nodded. "Man doesn't want to be in charge, but charge finds him anyway." Marion's eyes softened. "He's building something bigger than this shop. He just doesn't know it yet." But Robert knew. At night, when the shop fell silent, he stayed behind, sweeping floors, wiping tools, as if cleaning away ghosts. He paused sometimes, staring at the walls, remembering when his own shops carried his name. He could almost hear his son's laughter again, echoing faint through the clatter of memories. It ached. But the ache no longer drowned him. Instead, it reminded him that what was gone could never return, but something new might still be built. The crew noticed the changes too. Kyle spoke bolder now, suggesting fixes, drawing diagrams. Dell taught with renewed patience, inspired by Robert's example. Even the youngest apprentices carried themselves taller. Customers returned with friends, each repeating the same phrase, "Ask for the drifter. He'll teach you something while he saves your car." The reputation grew, not as Barker's auto, but as the place where a forgotten master taught again. One evening, as the sun bled orange through the bay doors, the crew gathered without planning to. Kyle asked Robert directly, "Why don't you take the shop?" Make it yours." Robert froze. His eyes drifted to the floor. "Because I already lost one once. Because what I build, I lose." Marion stepped forward, voice steady. "Not this time. You're not building it alone. Look around. Every hand here is building with you." Dell added, "And if you walk away, we walk too. This place only breathes because of you." Robert swallowed hard. His silence spoke of fear, but also of a heart breaking open. The next day, a journalist from a local TV station arrived, camera in hand. Clint, who had not returned since his disgrace, was forgotten. The lens sought Robert, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "Interview Kyle," he said. "Or Dell, or anyone here. This isn't about me." But the reporter pressed, "How did it all begin?" Robert's answer was simple, "With bread." The crew fell silent. Customers nearby listened too. He continued softly, "I only wanted a piece of bread, but bread led me here, to these men, these engines, this place. Sometimes the smallest hunger can wake the biggest truths." The words spread faster than any repair he'd ever made. That night, the segment aired across the city. The homeless mechanic who asked for bread and built a family. When the shop opened the next morning, the line of cars was longer than ever. But the men weren't overwhelmed. They worked with focus, with pride. Robert guided, corrected, encouraged, and though he still sat on the dented chair during breaks, it was no longer the seat of an outsider. It was the anchor of the shop. For the first time in years, Robert felt the dangerous, beautiful weight of belonging, and this time he didn't push it away. The week after the TV segment, the shop changed forever. Cars no longer just lined the street, they clogged the block. A parade of engines, limping toward the man, whispered about in diners, offices and classrooms. Customers came not only with broken vehicles but with stories. "My brother lost his job because of his car. Can you help him? My daughter drives 2 hours to school. Please make it safe." And Robert helped them all, moving with quiet patience. He never rushed, never treated one problem bigger than another. To him, every engine mattered because every life behind it mattered. But the fame pressed on him like a weight. Reporters called daily. Churches asked him to speak. Even the mayor's office hinted at a ceremony. Each time, Robert shook his head. "I fix cars. That's enough." Yet inside, he knew it wasn't. One evening, after the bays emptied, Marion found him sitting on the dented chair, bread untouched in his lap. "You're shrinking from this," she said softly. Robert's eyes stayed on the floor. "Because I know what comes after rising. Falling." Her voice sharpened. "You're not alone this time. Look out there. Dell, Kyle, the others. They don't follow you because they need a boss. They follow you because you remind them of who they can be." He finally met her eyes. "And what if I failed them?" Marion shook her head. "Then you fail together. That's what family is." The word cut deeper than she knew. Family. Robert's breath caught. He hadn't said that word in years without feeling it tear through him. The next morning, Dell entered early, carrying a folded newspaper. He handed it to Robert without a word. The front-page headline read, "Professor of Mechanics, the Truth Behind the Homeless Master." Beneath, an old photo, Robert, years younger, standing proudly in front of Anders Automotive, arm around a boy no older than 10. His wife stood beside him, smile bright. The crew gathered, murmuring. Kyle whispered, "Is that your son?" Robert's throat tightened. It was. The room fell into reverent silence. Even the youngest apprentices sensed the sacredness of the grief. Dell spoke gently. "You don't have to hide anymore. They deserve to know who you are." Robert closed the paper, eyes glistening. "Who I was. The man in that photo is gone." Marion stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "No, he's here. Every time you teach, every time you fix, every time you choose humility instead of pride, you bring him back." That afternoon, the shop overflowed with cars. but something heavier pressed on Robert. A customer thanked him profusely. A young mother with 2 children buckled in the back seat. As she drove off, Robert stood frozen, the echo of his wife's laugh and his son's sneakers slamming through memory. The weight nearly buckled him. He stumbled to the corner, gripping the dented chair. Dell noticed but said nothing, respecting the private battle. Later, Kyle approached timidly. "Mr. Anders, can I ask something?" Robert sighed, weary. "Go on. Why did you give up after losing them? Why didn't you fight to keep your shops, your students?" Robert's eyes closed, voice rough. "Because when you lose your reason, nothing else matters. The shops, the cars, the teaching, it all turned to ash." Kyle swallowed hard, then opened his notebook, pages thick with Robert's phrases. "Then maybe we're your reason now." The words struck deeper than any engine's roar. Robert turned away, unable to answer. That night, as he locked the bay doors, Marion stood waiting. "You can't keep hiding in bread and engines," she said. "The city sees you, your men see you, and whether you like it or not, you're becoming a legend." Robert shook his head. "Legends don't bleed like I do." She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "But legends rise from bleeding." For the first time, Robert didn't look away. And in that silence, something shifted. A man not yet healed, but no longer broken beyond repair. The shop lights dimmed, the night thickened, but Robert knew the past no longer held chains, only scars. And scars, if carried right, could light the way for others. The celebration wasn't planned. It grew, like everything else, since Robert had walked through the shop doors, asking only for bread. On a Saturday afternoon, the lot overflowed. Cars lined the street not for repair, but for gratitude. Customers brought food, music, laughter. Families sat on folding chairs. Kids played tag between bumpers, and the smell of grilled meat mingled with motor oil. Someone hung a banner across the entrance. "Second chances live here." Robert stood awkwardly near his dented chair, the same one where he had first eaten bread in silence. Now it was surrounded by people clapping his shoulder, thanking him, smiling like they'd known him all their lives. He nodded politely, but his eyes carried that familiar humility, as if all of this belonged to someone else. Marion approached, her dress catching the late sun, a smile breaking across her face. "You built this, Robert, whether you accept it or not." He shook his head lightly. "I fixed a few engines, that's all." "No," she corrected softly. "You fixed us." Kyle ran up, clutching his notebook. "Mr. Anders, they want you to speak." Robert blinked, unsettled. "Speak?" Dell appeared beside him, hand heavy on his shoulder. "It's time, son. You've been teaching us all along. Just say it out loud." A makeshift stage had been set, an old workbench pushed forward, with headlights from parked cars shining against it like spotlights. The crowd hushed as Robert stepped up. He held his hands low, palms calloused, jacket still frayed. For a long moment he said nothing. The silence itself became its own kind of sermon. Finally his voice rose, steady, quiet enough to force everyone to lean in. "I came here for bread," he began, "just bread. I thought that was all I deserved. I had lost everything, my family, my shops, myself, and when a man loses himself, bread feels like enough." The crowd listened, eyes fixed on him, Marion's hands clasped at her chest. "But engines have a way of speaking, and when I listened to them, I realized I still knew how to fix more than machines. I could fix mornings. I could fix hope. I could fix a place where men thought they had nothing left to give." He paused, swallowing the weight of memory. His eyes glistened, but his voice did not waver. "I am Robert Anders. Once I was called the Professor of Mechanics. Then I was nothing, but standing here I see the truth. A man is never nothing as long as he can lift another man, teach another hand, fix another broken piece of this world." The applause began soft, then swelled until the entire lot shook with it. Kyle wiped his eyes. Dell's hands clapped like thunder. Marion looked at him not with pity, but with pride. After the cheers faded, customers lingered, sharing food and stories. A journalist snapped photos discreetly, knowing tomorrow's headline was already written. Children begged to hold wrenches, pretending to be mechanics like Robert. Apprentices gathered asking for lessons. But Robert slipped away to the back of the lot, sitting once again on his chair, watching the crowd with quiet awe. Marion found him there. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, we did. Dell, Kyle, the others, even Clint in his way. Without all of it, I'd still be lost." Marion smiled. "So what now?" Robert gazed at the workshop, glowing under strings of borrowed lights, alive with laughter and possibility. "Now we build, not just cars, people, futures." As the night deepened, the celebration roared on. But Robert felt peace, something he hadn't touched in years. He no longer carried only grief, he carried purpose. The dented chair was still there, but it no longer looked like a seat of exile. It looked like a throne of humility. And as the crowd lifted their glasses, chanting his name, Robert raised his bread in return. "Second chances," he said simply. The words echoed louder than engines, louder than applause. And in that moment, the man who once believed he was finished understood. He had become more than a mechanic. He had become a legend of hope. "Noise, unfortunately, has cost." Valerie's jaw ticked. "Dad, I'm speaking to Alex," Roberto said without looking at her. Then, returning to his guest with a warmth that didn't heat, "I don't believe you are malicious. I believe you are earnest. Earnest men are dangerous because they underestimate the games they are in. And practiced men are dangerous because they pretend it's not a game," Valerie said softly. Roberto's smile thinned.